my entire business is based on Beyonce, and when she says, when the world sends you lemons, you've got to make lemonade. So we've had lemons in fucking extraordinary measures, haven't we, since February 22? Well, maybe even March 20. We've had some lemons thrown our way, and every single one of them has just given opportunity. I mean, we're batting off opportunities. It's extraordinary. There are 9 million bedrooms tonight in the homes of the over 65 that have no one sleeping in them, right? And there are 300,000 people who are technically homeless, either sleeping on the street or sofa surfing. 300,000 people have nowhere to live, 9 million bedrooms with no one in them. The solution is there. You just have to allow your grandparents to move to the right size thing. If I do my job properly, 80% of our residents will die with us. We haven't got to that number yet. It's actually quite hard to own your own bed, but we're getting closer. And for me, that's a promise to our residents.
Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast. Today, we are joined by Honor Barratt, CEO of Birchgrove. At Birchgrove, Honor and her team believe that renting instead of owning a home is the most liberating form of tenure and allows their residents to retain their independence without the burdens of home ownership. Birchgrove, backed by Bridges Fund Management, operate a portfolio of assisted living developments with contemporary apartments, full rent, in brand new purpose-built facilities within and around the M25. Honor has had a previous career in the television, broadcasting, production and media world before moving into the real estate space as a second career. And it gives me great pleasure that she's on the podcast today. So Honor, welcome to the podcast.
I'm very excited to be here, Matt.
Oh, I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we
with
are.
this
We
one.
got this.
A couple of things that are interesting about you in comparison to the other 79 or so of the ones that I've done.
Were they all men?
No, they weren't all men.
Good.
They weren't. But most people kind of get into real estate early on in their career. This is kind of a second career for you. And then secondly, most of them have never done a podcast before. You've done a couple, which would come as no great surprise given your previous media experience. But before we kind of get on to Birchgrove and unpacking that kind of second part of your real estate career and what the opportunity set is, a place that I normally ask is how you get into real estate. But here, can you just give me a little bit of a background and an overview of your upbringing and how you kind of decided to get into kind of maybe media and television and what that kind of previous career looked like?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever actively decided anything.
I can't believe that.
No, honestly, I got into TV because I went to a party and a bloke said, I need a runner. And I was like, fuck, I can run. I mean, I have no idea what a runner did. So that was the Saturday and I started with him on the Monday. And that was it. That was my career in TV, which does a little bit go to the old entitled background that I have, because I was fortunate enough to be at that party because of where I went to school. And it does really make me conscious, actually, in my later life of, I have to correct that. I have to kind of undo that damage. I got that amazing job because of the school that I went to. So now I need to find other people to work in my business who didn't have that. We've got quite a lot to atone for. I reckon you have too, Matt, from your accent.
I've got an awful lot.
So it's our job to undo that.
And that's, well, it's not about me, but that's one of the key things. One of the drivers about this podcast is trying to break down and educate around what a great platform and career opportunity real estate is, because it's quite a closed group. But actually, interestingly, a lot of people who have come on the podcast have no idea about real estate as a career and, got into it, not through a family member, but through other means. But that's another point completely. So you became a runner within the TV
within
space.
About 50 meters of your office. And I just ran. These are the days, you won't even believe, Matt, you had to record things onto a tape, then you give it to a human being who runs across Soho and takes it to an editor who edits it, and then you run across from Soho to ITV and you play it to them, and then it was ridiculous. But I did Spice Girls, the movie. Oh, was it called Spice World, the movie? And a James Bond in that year. And I just spent a lot of time running around Soho with tapes in my hand.
That's right at the top, isn't it? Can't get bigger than James Bond and Spice Girls. You're early.
Which one is making your eyes twinkle? Yeah, they were both amazing fun. You do start at the top, but actually, interestingly, I left film to go to TV because in film you have to have quite a long attention span. It takes like 5 years to get a James Bond done, and I struggled with that.
Shorter than a development.
So then I went to TV and I worked in 30 seconds, and we were always turning things around for that night's TV. And of course now I'm back into real estate, which is like, oh, this is going to take me 8 years to get this sparkle of an idea to an exit and make some money. It's a long, you do have to have attention in property, don't you?
Big time. So you went from kind of long form content to short form content. So you worked at the Creative Partnership and then you moved to Dunlop Woods as head of production. Is that when you did your short form content stint?
That is it. And it's so funny. I haven't even heard the words Creative Partnership for such a long time. But one of my first learnings was the agency that I joined, this bloke. I haven't got a runner. Great start on Monday. About 18 months after that, we were all called into the office and they sat us all down and said, okay, so the company's really in trouble, so we're selling ourselves for £1 to the Creative Partnership. And at that moment, I felt so devastated that they hadn't bothered to bring us in on that. And I just sat there going, if I'd known, could I have worked harder? Could I have done something about it? Why didn't I know? I feel like you've traded me to the next people. And it has become this thing in my head that I possibly over-communicate now because I just want us all to know exactly how the land lies, because at that moment I felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me.
And that means with investors, with employees, with stakeholders, with residents. Is that the whole thing you over-communicate?
I over-communicate. Bridges know every single cup of sick that is currently on the table at Birchgrove.
That's key metric they're reporting on.
The cup of sick metric. And I do rely on them to get their hands into that cup of sick and find some nugget out of there to help me turn a problem around. I never hide my homework. It was a little bit when I was at Octopus, which was after TV. They had this really amazing entrepreneur, big, fat, charismatic, demanding pighead. You meet them, don't you? And he was like a property bloke. And he hid his homework from Octopus. And so it became a really adversarial relationship. And I was sitting on the sidelines going, you've taken their money. You have to show them the good and the bad. You have to show your homework here. You have to communicate with them because you've taken their money. And so now with Bridges, that was my learning from that particular. You can't take someone's money and then...
Has that always served you well, being that honest?
No, I'd say there are occasions where I think maybe I'm sitting in one right now where I told Bridges a planning challenge, which of course they're really anxious about. It's a GLA, these planning challenges. And if I hadn't told them, maybe they wouldn't be feeling so anxious, but I have to go with the belief that there are big brains sitting around this table. Somebody around this table is going to have a solution which is possibly better than mine. So I have to. But it does cause them anxiety. And it does cause me to get second-guessed a lot. But the alternative is not using those brains.
And probably not sleeping well at night.
Oh, well, none of us sleep. To be clear, none of us sleep at all.
So tell me about leaving Dunlop Woods as head of production and BDA Creative. Talk to me about that kind of transition and that little journey.
So this was probably the beginning of the most significant relationship of my life outside of my husband.
Just caveat that.
Just a little bit. And this was an amazing man who, again, bit overweight, incredibly charismatic, pig-headed. Man, this guy, I don't really want to say his name actually, just in case, but he'd fought in the Vietnam War and he brought that mentality to our business. And I partnered with him, and that incredible gung-ho, nothing is going to get in our way. That was what I learned from him. It was a partnership where he fucking pushed and I just came behind him, sweeping everything up. He innovated in an incredibly single-minded, dogmatic way, and my job was to just make it happen. and bring it together. And it was the beginning of a 15-year relationship, it is the most significant relationship of my life. It's probably the one I have really great regrets around, but he taught me about forward momentum. Don't let anything get in your way. Don't sweat the small stuff. Like, just push this shit through.
And to be really clear, was he your business partner?
Yes, he wasn't
He wasn't your relationship, but he was your business partner. But you went into business together, did you? Or did you join a business?
I should have said that. No, we set up a business together.
Okay. So how much experience, professional experience, and we can't really talk about age, but how old were you at that time?
So I was 28. He'd just had his 50th birthday. He'd just been sacked by Liz Murdoch in a blaze of glory, and she'd given him a couple $100,000 to fuck off. And so we took that money and we set it up together. So he had loads of experience and I had none. But together it was like the perfect match.
And what was the strategy? What was the idea? What was the business at that stage?
I don't know whether we actually ever articulated it, Matt. We never put anything down on paper. We just ran at it.
Ran at what?
He had the relationships and I had the wherewithal to produce the content. So it's quite shameful now, Matt. But when you're 28, you don't realise it's not the right thing to do to work for Rupert Murdoch. And so we just followed Rupert Murdoch around the world. Bruce had that relationship, that's his name. And everywhere that Rupert Murdoch went, we followed. We set up whatever crazy shit he wanted to get up to. You want to go and buy 2 channels in Italy. You want to conquer Germany. You want to take news to Australia. We just followed Rupert Murdoch around the world. That was the strategy, probably.
And
do stuff.
Do execute,
whatever
implement.
It takes, whatever's needed. I think maybe unlike in property, because it does take so long to do anything, and because you're investing gazillions of money, the innovation maybe takes a bit longer. Whereas in TV, you're just making stuff that's going to be seen once. I mean, it's a very disposable format because we're predominantly doing news and sport. It's what's happening right now.
But it's quite a lot of production still that goes into that, and it's quite a lot of time and effort, a lot of moving parts to do that very small clip.
Yeah, but it's not rocket science. There's nobody. So it's a little bit like property in that you don't really meet like huge brains. There are, it's just people who are creative predominantly, left-handed, dyslexic people, my favourite type of person.
And so talk to me about the journey. How big did you grow that agency? What was the journey? What did you do?
We ended up London, Munich, Singapore, Sydney, Dubai. An office in each of those 5. There's about 150 of us. Each of those offices had their own lovely reason for being. Australia made the most beautiful work. The Germans did exactly what they said they were going to do. The Singaporeans were like the workshop of the place. They just worked 24 hours a day. London was, I don't know, the high profile. Dubai, not sure it ever got off the ground. But we ended up with an award which was Global Agency of the Year. I mean, that's what Bruce pulled off. His creativity got us Agency of the Year. And that's where...
I think you're doing yourself down by saying that.
No, honestly. And that's when we took on outside money. And here I'm slightly torn, Matt. Was it the right thing to do? I think this was probably where I really learnt that lesson. There's no such thing as, when you take their money, you kind of got to doff the cap. And we took the money. We both have various houses that we paid for with that money, but it comes with compromises. And when you get a pig-headed, creative entrepreneur meeting private equity money, it's uncomfortable sometimes. And I don't think, we didn't create value out of that transaction. I mean, we paid our own mortgages, but the sum of the parts was not greater as a result. And I've always been really conscious of that. If you sell your soul, there's a price. There's no such thing. It's just, although I met this guy the other day, crazy Irish bloke, and he said his whole strategy was on just put I can't do an Irish accent. It's like, just put the fucking money in its place. They're only the money men. Don't fucking let them run your business. Put them in their place. If they don't want to fund you, go find someone else. And he's got to a point where he could take the money and not allow it to corrupt the business. But we didn't manage to do that.
So how did that end then?
Bruce and I had a massive relationship breakdown.
Between you and him?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to make it work with the private equity.
Yeah, and he wasn't.
And
he's
he
not
wasn't
a
into it.
compromising type. And that was the uncomfortable realization. I made the wrong decision.
In terms of exiting to private equity?
Yeah. I think we were really happy before the money got involved.
What should you have done?
Honestly, Matt, I don't know. What should I have done? I just know I shouldn't have done that, but I don't know what the alternative was. It's like the great sadness of my life.
So moving on from there, what did you do next? And you had this big bust up.
With the big
business
bust up,
partner.
I stayed with Octopus, and
so Octopus with a capital,
yeah,
the private equity capital.
And I really enjoy working with Octopus. I still work with them now. They have money in one of my developments at the moment. They are incredibly clever people who are in it for the right reason. It's really inspiring and interesting to be in their company. I loved it. I worked there, running a portfolio company for them for 7 years. Learnt loads, got pushed out of my comfort zone.
Still in the media and
yes,
tech and production world?
Until they said, there's this floundering company over here, will you go and have a look? And that was senior living. And I didn't want to go and have a look because that's not remotely sexy. And within 90 seconds of walking in on site, I was like, shit, this is sexy. This is really exciting. And so just in the space of an afternoon, moved from TV into old people.
So before we get on to that, like what skills did you acquire at this stage? And if you were to kind of like write a job description, like what were your strengths, what were your weaknesses, or like what were the things that you were doing in terms of your kind of day to day at that role that made them go, we want that in a slightly different sector, and we want you to apply your.
So Matt, you must know, it's probably your wife. People who just get shit done. And I'm just one of those people who does not overthink it, not particularly strategic, never take the no, just do whatever it takes to get the yes. That is, like, I'll just turn my hand to anything. I think I'm probably not a specialist at anything, but God, man, maybe I'm going back to my entitled upbringing again, but I never think that there's something I can't do. I never go, oh shit, I can't do that. I kind of go, yeah, fuck it, that'll be fine. I'll make it up. I'll work it out. I'm one of those people. And what they had over there down the M4 in Wilshire was a little bit of a car crash that needed somebody to fix that, and that. And you need a bit of a multidisciplinary person to do that rather than specialist, brilliant people.
So it was more the behaviours that you had rather than the technical kind of skills.
Yeah. There's no technical skill. I have no skill other than saying yes. I just say yes to anything.
Can you set boundaries?
No. I don't have any. I think it must be really difficult to work with me. I don't have any boundaries. God. I'm trying to think of something in my life. My husband would disagree with that. He'd say, oh, you say no often enough on it. I have no boundaries.
So you went down to Wiltshire, and what did you see in Wiltshire? And what was it exactly that kind of changed your mindset from hell no to, wow, this is exciting?
I think it was the scale of the ambition. That's the thing about property, I think, that really seduces me. There's I love the sense of home, but the scale of what people pull off, looking at what Argent did in King's Cross, it blows your mind, doesn't it? That when you die, you left that impact. Like that is your legacy piece, which is a total volte face, isn't it? From me making 30-second super disposable bits of TV. You will leave this earth better than when you arrived. And this thing down in Wiltshire was the first inkling. It was just a pile of mud and some plans and a contractor that was in a mess. You know, it was a mess. But you're like, shit, when we do this, there will be 250 people who are living the most extraordinary lives. And so now, 8 years later, that is exactly what it's like down there. There's people thriving. There's amazing business in the middle of it. There's a piece of wasteland is now home. And it will remain like that for years. And maybe it's just the legacy of what we do in property. The world knows that you were here.
And so you called your boss or whoever it was and said, I'm in.
I'm in.
And what were you jumping into?
So all of us in property, maybe, are nothing without the sale or the transaction or the exit. I mean,
capital.
Yeah. You can have all the ideas in the
Team.
world, but if you can't make some money out of it, if you can't sell it to someone, then it's just a good idea. It's not something that you ever can good at. So we needed to start taking money in with the left hand so we could fund the construction with the right hand. So that was what I did. I had no knowledge, but yeah, it was like crack. It's so seductive. Working with old people and putting them in something that is going to make them blossom is extraordinary. It really is addictive. I've taken on, everybody really that I've taken on since has been from outside the industry.
In terms of?
Employees, teammates. And when they join, I'm always like really clear. Once you join, you'll never leave old people. I think it's probably impossible to go, I'm going to go back to, I don't know, build to rent or for sale. Like, it is really addictive. And maybe this is because we have a social impact funder in Bridges, that you're actively measuring and working towards the impact of the thing that you do, not just an IRR and a money multiple. And they genuinely believe it, Bridges. They genuinely think that it is their job to spend that money in the most impactful way. And so you're always conscious of, how am I having that? How am I having an impact? What am I doing? It's never really about the bricks, is it? It's about home.
So were Bridges involved at the time, or what was the team, what was the platform, what was the infrastructure, the projects that you kind of got airdropped into? What did you inherit?
So there was nothing. So I was working with Octopus in the for sale model, and then Bridges had invested in about 15 care homes, and they made loads of money, but they were really conscious that they were building something that no one ever wanted to end up in. Maybe except your great-grandmother. No, your grandparents, who for some reason chose to live in a care home. Well, but no one really...
Well, not chose.
Yeah.
No. I think we were just talking off mic, weren't we? I was just saying, just thinking about this conversation or you coming in, I was thinking my paternal great-grandmother lived in a kind of assisted living scheme, and I remember turning up there. And I thought it was rental, but probably wasn't. And then my maternal grandparents, who are no longer here, they downsized. And it's a terrible idea. And I said to my mum, why the hell did you enable them to do that? They downsized from their lovely thatched cottage on the Isle of Wight to a bungalow. Low maintenance, one ground, easy. But then within a couple of years, my grandfather sadly had to go to a home. And then probably a couple of years after that, my grandmother sadly died. And so it was a hell of a lot of like cost, aggro, wasted money, transitioning from a lovely thatched cottage to a bungalow, to money out the door to care, to just a bit of a faff, frankly. And so there could have definitely been a better proposition or an opportunity there. But you're going to come on and tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am. But I think, to be clear, they weren't being stupid. We hadn't built them an alternative. Like, they were making the best of what they could there. And that is messy, isn't it? That is unnecessary moves, and you ended up in care. No one wants to end up in a care home. And that was a bit where Bridges came from. No one actually wants to end up in a care home. So why are we, a social impact fund, building more care homes? Like, what is the thing that they do want? What is the thing before your grandparents left the bungalow and went to a care home? What is the thing? And they came up with this idea of renting in retirement. And they hunted me down. They were actually running a formal process with a recruitment agent. And then, this is the theme of my life. I met a bloke in a pub.
Pig-headed, fat. It's like the third one.
He's not fat, but he's very entrepreneurial. And he's called Mel, and he changed my life because he met me in Soho House, and I talked to him for 20 minutes, and then he was like, "Why are you not in the running for this job?" I was like, "I don't want a job. I've got a perfectly good life over here." And he's like, "No, you need this." So it was interesting. It's my only real interaction with a recruitment agent, Will. They kept saying to me, "Can you send us your CV?" I said, "I'm not sending you my CV. I don't want the job. Like, I don't have a CV. I haven't had a CV since I was 20. Well, I never had one at that first. Who has a CV to get a runner job?" But they saw in me, I guess, somebody who was going to run a million miles an hour at something that everybody else said would fail, which is old people won't step off the housing ladder. They have made all their money. They've made more money out of rising house price than they have out of the jobs. They will never step off that.
Their castle, that's everything. Yes. That's the British aspiration.
It is, isn't it? I don't know where it comes from, but we, more than anybody, we are obsessed with home ownership. And Mel Knight said, "No, this is the girl. She's going to push it through." And there we go. I thought they were mad for about 2 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I needed. This is what the market needed. And I kept going back in my head to a woman who was called Marilyn, and she'd had 3 husbands. They'd all died on her, so she's quite well off, but she was living in a 4-bedroom house on her own. And she came and she looked at this thing that we'd built in Wiltshire, and she said, it's amazing, Honor, but I've left it too late. I think the move would kill me. And it was really hard to argue with that. She's in the same position as your maternal grandparents. Like, why the bloody hell would she go and buy another property right now at the age of 86? And so she trotted off back to the 4-bedroom house with all those under-occupied bedrooms, and it didn't end up well for Marilyn. And when Mel said, "We think old people should rent," I was like, oh my God, that's what I needed for her. I needed to be able to say, this is a totally frictionless transaction, Marilyn. I'll do it all for you. You just have to turn up one day. Someday in the next 2 weeks.
Just turn up.
Turn up. I'll put the curtains up and let's live. No solicitors, not like literally. When people move with us, there's not even a solicitor involved. They just turn up.
Like check into a hotel.
It's exactly like that. It's exactly that easy. We haven't yet, and we aspire to get to the point where when you do come and move in, there's 6 members of staff lined up saying, "Oh, hello, lovely to meet you." We haven't nailed that bit yet. You sort of walk in and go, "Shit, it's like a bonfire in here." But it should be as frictionless as just checking into a hotel. And therefore, someone like Marilyn should have no reason to just go back and live on her own in that 4-bedroom house.
So I bet you kind of talked yourself out of the opportunity in that interview, Woodbridge, no?
What do you mean?
Well, it sounds like I've got a good thing going on here. It sounds interesting, but, I'm sure you were very self-depreciating, like there's going to be much better candidates and more experience, or is it a case of...
Do you know what? They told me afterwards I almost didn't get it because I swore too much, and they couldn't understand why. I think they actually couldn't understand why a woman would swear so much in an interview. But you have to do it was like a presentation. Like, you must set this for your candidates. When you get down to the last 2, you've got to pull something out of the bag.
As a case study or presentation or something.
And my strategy was to do an amazingly beautiful deck, print it on A3 on really good quality paper, and then hand it out. And it was like they were going, "Ooh, this feels good." I mean, who knows what the content was, but it looked amazing. But yeah. In credit to the chairman, so my chairman is Mark Elliott. He used to be the chief exec of McCarthy & Stone, and this was his first chairman role. And he deliberately set out in a very mindful way that Mark doesn't do anything by mistake, to source the chief exec who was the exact opposite of him. And he was trying to pull himself he's a qualified accountant, started at EY, does everything properly, floated business, like he was like a perfect CEO until he was trying to find the opposite. So I came along because he knew that the perfect pairing on a board should be opposites.
Yin and yang.
Yeah. And he almost went down the route of, choosing a safe option, and then caught himself at the end and went, oh no, I need the total opposite to me. So she may well swear, and she did wear jeans to the interview, and she doesn't know what she's talking about, but she's the opposite. So let's have that one.
So talk me through the early years of assuming the CEO role. What were the opportunities and what were the fires that you were kind of putting out?
The opportunity was they gifted me a piece of land with planning permission on the side of a dual carriageway overlooking a hospital, which looks like a porta cabin. But I think this is a strength of female CEOs. We're an incredibly pragmatic bunch, and we look at it and go, fuck it, I'll make something of that. I'm not going to ponce about going back into planning and changing, I'm going to make that work. So I think I got the job on the 1st of March, and we started on site 3rd of May. Like, we went in fast and started to build it. And then it just was being incredibly open about making this up as I go along. Nobody knows how to do this in this country. You haven't done it.
In terms of the
rental model, sorry.
The rental model
so
for assisted living.
I would characterise it as build to rent for old people. So that's what we were inventing.
And no one else had done that in the UK at this stage?
No, not in this form. Basically, you have care homes. You can rent in a care home, but it's an entirely different form of tenure, isn't it? And there's like an unintended consequence of council tax. So this goes right back to 1984 or whatever it was when Maggie Thatcher invented this. If you have an oven, you have to pay council tax. If you don't have an oven, you're free of that. So all these places were being built where your grandmother can't cook for herself because they want to save her the council tax. And she's also not allowed to lock her own front door. That's about council tax. If you have a key, you can lock your front door and someone else can't get in, you have to pay council tax. And so you end up with care homes where you have no independence, you can't feed yourself, and you can't lock your own front door, so people prop your door open so they can see you easily as they walk down the corridor. That's a bit of a by the by, but it's a really interesting unintended consequence of how we end up living in something that's not right for us because of some spurious decision made 3 decades previously. So I don't even know how we got onto that, Matt, but we were making it up as we went along. And the biggest challenge was getting some debt for that first little porter cabin.
To prove the concept.
Yeah. And everybody was going, oh yeah, Honor, great, yeah. Give me a shout when it's done. Fuck. It was really hard. And I just kept going to loads of meetings where I thought we're there. And then they come back from IC or whatever and say, oh no, you didn't make it through Gateway 3 or whatever. I don't know what we didn't make it through, but there's no comps on us, so we can't reassure our backers that you're good for it. So Bridges, in their absolute commitment to this idea, they just went equity 100% all the way through that building, which is extraordinary, isn't it? They did not falter. There was no misstep. They never panicked. They just held the line. They said, we're so convinced by this business model, we're going to fund it entirely out of equity. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to sign a JCT because I had no way of funding it. And that's extraordinary, that level of holding their nerve. It's really impact. I was so lucky. I'm in no doubt that the success of Birchgrove is entirely down to our funders and their ability to hold the line.
That relationship between developer and capital and the transparency you touched on earlier,
It's the transparency,
right?
Isn't it? I never hid anything from them. So they felt confident that they always knew where the cat sick was.
And so talk to me about that first scheme then, just in terms of beds, size.
Okay, you want to know.
Yeah, just paint a picture of someone listening to this, in terms of what is a Birchgrove scheme.
So the first one is 74 units, 1s, 2s and 3s. It's about 80,000 square foot. It's an L shape, fairly unattractive building. But when you walk in, you forget how ugly it is, because when you walk in, you realise, oh, this has got nothing to do with property and everything to do with how it feels. And somebody said once they walked in, it feels like being given a warm hug when you walk in that building. So it really doesn't matter whether this apartment's got a balcony or that one's got a second bathroom. The property sale if we're trying to sell property, we're doomed because it's quite expensive. We're never selling property. We're selling that hug that you get when you walk in. But if you wanted to know, yes, it's on about 1.2 acres, L-shaped. It's a timber frame. Do that again.
CLT, really?
Yeah. It's really difficult to get insurance. And it is now 100% full with a wait list. What we call a ready list. I'm not sitting here waiting. I'm sitting here ready.
Love it.
And the bags are packed. I'll take whatever unit you give me. Because the punters start to realise as well, it's not about, is it south-facing 2-bed with a balcony, which is what you get in the for sale model. The for sale model, you're obsessed about the on sale of that apartment when you're dead.
So it's the liquidity of your actual unit.
Whereas in the rental model, you're like, I don't care, because like the minute I die, it triggers a month's notice. My family don't have to find a buyer for this. I'm not obsessed about the value of it. I'm just going to live in it and then I'll die. So it's again, we're back into that frictionless transaction. I'm not waiting for a garden south facing. I'll just take whichever one you give me, which is a really interesting quirk of the rental model that none of us saw coming. And when I talk to the for sale guys now, there's this sort of, I can feel their jealousy. I don't think I fill up any quicker than them, but I know that when I take a reservation, it's 34 days to the move-in. Whereas when you take a reservation in the for sale model, it's like 7 months at the moment because the market is so sticky. So it's an amazing transaction to do a rental.
So who is a Birchgrove avatar? Like who are the occupiers, the people that you're targeting for these schemes?
So every neighbourhood that we go into development on has a muse, and you need a muse really strongly in your head, because when it gets tough, as it always does, doesn't it, in construction, something gets tough, you need that person in your head that's spurring you on. So we have a couple in Sidcup, and we met them really early on, and the husband has Parkinson's, and the wife, who's super sprightly, feels like her retirement has been stolen from her, because actually she's now dealing with probably the worst. I mean, it's even worse than dementia, I think, Parkinson's, because your body just, you're really conscious of how bad it is. So these two were our muse. And so throughout that, you're looking at it and going, well, is that going to be right for him? And will that liberate her? And can she really enjoy that? And how would they do that together? And it's like a really strong vision of who you're building for. If you asked me what are the generics, I would say they're 82 years old. They come from within 3 miles of the site. They live with us for about 4.5 years. 33% of them are childless. 22% of them are in receipt of care. 11% of them have cognitive impairment. But that's just describing generic old people. Every one of our developments has the muse, and that's who you work your socks off for. My muse in Woking, it's extraordinary. But the day that we completed on the transaction, we bought it with planning. This guy went and found on the Woking Council portal, found the planning portal, got the plans, worked out who'd bought it, found me on LinkedIn, got my mobile number, called me up, and he said, oh, hello, I'd like to buy apartment number 3. I was like, Jesus Christ. I only bought it about 5 minutes ago. And so for the rest of the process, he and his wife would come in every month. We'd look at the construction, he'd look at the plans, and he'd tell me, and like we were really, really clear exactly who we're building this for, because he tracked us down.
And you're like, I'm really sorry, but you can't buy it?
Yes.
You can rent it though.
Do you know when I said that to him, he sort of recoiled from me, and he said, oh, Honor, I've always thought of myself as an owner. And I said, yeah, I get that, Peter, but tell me about, what is it that you love about homeownership? And we're sitting in his home at this moment, because I haven't got anything for him to come and look at. I'm sitting in his home, and I said, tell me. And he'll say, well, yeah. I said, why would you leave this amazing house? He, yeah, Honor, the gardener is completely getting on top of me, and my wife is now sleeping downstairs because she can't get up the stairs, and that driveway is quite steep, so in the winter it's... So then within a couple of minutes, he's like, oh yeah, no, you're right. Like, home ownership is hard. It's miserable and boring, and none of us like it. Matt, I know you have 2 homes, and I bet you prefer the one that you rent. Don't you? You can just call up and say, oh no, you don't. You've got quite elderly landlord and landlady.
Yeah, I've got an elderly landlady, yeah. And really sadly, he's actually just been taken into hospital the last couple of... But it's really stressful for them.
Yeah. This stuff is hard.
You're right. We rent a property down in Sussex, and it's been in her family for hundreds of years, and they've got a big farm that's contracted out and 12 properties. But it's really stressful.
It's hard, isn't it? But that emotional, like cutting that, it's going to be brutal. Maybe they won't even cut it. Someone will inherit it. Yeah.
Well, really sadly, they don't have any heirs. So that's a sad story. But it is really, really stressful for them. It's great for me because actually they just value paying the rent on time. They haven't moved our rent on. Yeah. They just like the energy and
family,
like us, and stability. They don't want the hassle. And so it's great from my perspective, flip reverse. But for them, it's really stressful having a massive house and this whole kind of thing to run. But yeah, I get your point completely. Was it really hard convincing the masses though?
If only there were masses.
Yeah, but I think you've got 500-600 odd units, don't you?
Yeah.
But convincing them from a mindset perspective, is there a big kind of like sales job on them, or is it more build it and they will come and
God,
share?
No, none of us. So when we first put up the hoardings at Sidcup, the first one, everybody called up and said, do you take housing benefit? We were like, oh, so that's what that word rent does. Everybody thinks rent is for poor people. So we had to take the word rent off all the hoardings and just start again. Like, shit, how do you go on this journey with people who, somebody like my muse at Woking, he was never going to make contact with us if he'd known it was to rent. How do we get over it, Matt? Potentially, this is why I'm so encouraging of competition in my market, which goes against the grain, doesn't it? That a chief exec would say, right, who wants into this sector? What can I tell you? How can you learn from my mistakes? How do you get into the rental sector? Because the more of us do it, the less people will be scared of it, or they'll think it's for poor people, which is the expression that they use. I need loads of people doing rental because I think it's the right thing to do, and I need everybody to do it brilliantly because none of us need a bad news story out there. None of us need somebody who had a bad experience in the rental model. So I want build to rent, student operators to pile in going, oh, it's kind of the same thing. It's just a slightly different customer. Pile in, but do it really well. Because I think in the US, we're at the point where on your 65th birthday, you join the wait list. But that whole build it and they will come. I mean, we are so many years, we're years away from that yet. And the trigger is penetration. It's everybody doing it. Me having loads of competition. Everybody spending money in the market saying, hey, renting in your retirement is a good thing.
Rising tide lifts.
We'll flow all these boats.
Well, exactly. Yes. Quick one from me. If you haven't already subscribed or followed this show on the podcast or app where you listen or watch, please do. It takes 10 seconds and helps tremendously. I've got really big plans for the People, Property, Place podcast, and that one small action really, really helps grow the show and the presence and enables us to keep doing what we're doing. So if you haven't already, please follow or like on the platform you watch or listen to. Thanks so much. So tell me, in terms of the because it's build to rent, so you'll buy land, get planning, or buy it with planning, and build bespoke units, but you'll also reposition existing assets, right?
Will I? Are you thinking about my developer deals?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you've called it reposition. I mean, I'm repurposing someone else's consent.
Yeah, you're okay. So it could be an office that you're repurposing or repositioning, right?
Well, we are okay. So we're back to female chief executives and being really pragmatic. In this current post Liz Truss that no one will acknowledge as Liz Truss downturn, there are house builders out there who had units they didn't particularly want to be putting on the for sale market right now because it's been a bit tricky. And so I've been like, oh, I'll take your units. I will repurpose them. So we're running a couple of communities under a C3 consent because it doesn't make any difference to the customer what their consent is. As long as the doors are wide enough and the showers have no lip. I mean, it's a perfectly good built-to-rent apartment. It works perfectly well for old people. So we are repurposing other people's consents. They're building them for us. And it's just another way of us trying to go faster, harder, do it at scale, do more of it, get the penetration up, get this rental story out there. So there's not a purist in me that's saying, well, I have to design it all from scratch myself, or it has to be in the perfect location. I'm just thinking about your grandparents. They ended up in a position where there was no choice out there. I mean, there wasn't enough of it. We hadn't built enough of it. So for me, I'm like, let's just build. And there will be lots of different models of rental and shared ownership and expensive ones and local authority funded. Like, we just need more of it. And then your grandparents have some choice. They can look around and go, well, I want to die in the place that I live, which is this village or wherever it is, and therefore I'll go into that one. We haven't got enough choice at the moment.
So people listening to this are going to want to understand the financial aspects of this as an investment opportunity. Can you just talk to me around the kind of the metrics and how you can monetize it and what the returns look like, etc.?
So we're trying to deliver a 20% IRR and a 2 times money. And that is quite expensive money, isn't it? But as I said, our social impact backers took a hell of a lot of risk with us, and they deserve that return. We exited our first 2 developments to M&G, who paid us on a 5% yield, and they bought Sidcup and Woking, and now are incredibly happy with their assets because they have 100% occupancy and 5-day turnarounds between tenancies, which is extraordinary because of the ready list. So far it's worked really well for Bridges and it's working really well for M&G. For me, I want a Birchgrove in every town of the country. I want your grandparents to have that choice. And at 20% and 2 times money, I'm going to struggle to do that outside the M25. I need to work out how I can fund cheaper money that allows me to do it in Nottingham and Solihull and Exeter. So that's the money that I'm seeking at the moment. Not that Bridges is done with us or that Birch goes up for sale. I'm kind of almost looking for how can I get an evergreen fund so that I don't have to sell any of my babies. I can keep them all together and they can just throw off this lovely recurring steady eddy revenue in perpetuity.
Backed by an awesome ready list. So it's just an amazing indexed, inflation-linked return, right? We're linked to RPI, and we chose RPI because the state pension goes up by RPI. And what we wanted was like your income, your cost to go up in lockstep with your income. And so when we put the rents up every January, the residents weirdly tend to say, well, thank you very much, Honor. Because we have done it in lockstep with how their pensions are increasing. Yeah, because that was going to be my next question in terms of how do you turn the rents and how do you set the rents and the rates and obviously the uplifts as well. How does that work?
Yeah, the rents are linked to the RPI. How we set the rents in the first place, I could bullshit you, Matt, and say there's some amazing formula, but there isn't. In some way, I triangulate between what I can get a build-to-rent apartment on the high street and what it'll cost me to move into a care home, and somewhere between those 2 numbers is the perfect intersection. I don't want us to go too expensive. I don't want someone to end up making a decision to move into a care home because it's more cost effective, because I don't want them in that care home. I want them to stay out. I want them to die with us. If I do my job properly, 80% of our residents will die with us. We haven't got to that number yet. It's actually quite hard to die in your own bed, but we're getting closer. And for me, that's a promise to our residents. None of us want to die in a hospital, and I would love to keep them all with us. But that's quite hard work. It's quite tough, that bit. It's quite tough on the staff, actually.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But it's a promise. It has to be a commitment. I have to be able to say to you, this can be your final home. I'm not going to ship you out again. You don't have to move. And, again, that's why I love the rental model. Because if you own your own home and you get dementia, it's pretty tough. Because when you get dementia, there's a moment where you can't cope anymore and you've got to go. And that moment does not allow for the process of putting your house on the market and going through conveyance. And, you just can't cope with that anymore. So we do try to keep our residents as long as possible in their home, in their own home, with their own lockable front door and their own oven, because no one wants to die in the NHS. And you and I don't want people to die in the NHS. The NHS shouldn't be the place that you have to go and die. They've got fixing to do. Which is, just one of the other benefits of everything that we do in later living. There's like a Ponzi scheme in operation, isn't it? Someone like you is paying your national insurance to fund my old age, and yet who the bloody hell's doing yours? It's like completely unsustainable, Matt. You are a bit stuffed. You need your own private pension here because the state is not going to step in for you. And what we need is measures that keep you out of the NHS, measures that allow you to liquidate one of your many houses, Matt, and pay for your own death. You need to be able to fund your own end of life here because the state will not be able to step in. And all these time bombs that we've got going off, NHS, social care, just the housing market itself, we feel really passionately in later living that we are a fundamental part of that solution. Do not look at old people like they're a burden. They have £2 trillion worth of assets. If you can just help them liquidize that, then a lot of our problems can be solved. That's how passionately we feel about it. I feel like when I go up to a planning committee and you sit there in an evening trying to get consent for 50 units, knowing that there's people sleeping on the high street, and you're just like, just give me the fucking consent because we need to build more. And
what are the stats around that?
So the stats are, for this particular issue, there are 9 million bedrooms tonight in the homes of the over 65 that have no one sleeping in them, right? And there are 300,000 people who are technically homeless, either sleeping on the street or sofa surfing. 300,000 people have nowhere to live, 9 million bedrooms with no one in them. The solution is there. You just have to allow your grandparents to move to the right size thing. And if you give it to them, then everybody takes one step to the left. The family move into that one, the young people move into that one, and the people over here at the bottom who are currently sleeping on people's sofas have a chance of having a home. And when we all talk about the NIMBYism and all that sort of stuff. We don't have to build on the green belt. We have enough bedrooms. We just need the people in the right bedrooms.
And so that's the bottleneck.
That's the bottleneck. We're not asking for tax break. Personally, I don't think old people, we don't need tax breaks. We made shitloads of money out of our properties. Don't have to give us tax breaks. You just have to give us something that we can choose and move into. Older people are not sitting in their 4-bedroom houses because they're lazy or greedy. They're sitting there because we haven't built the alternative for them. If we build it for them, everybody benefits. The bubble comes out of the housing market because there might actually be enough houses for us all to live in. From a sustainability point of view, old people do not tend to invest in their houses. They're not really insulating. They have got gas boilers. If you pop them in with me, the family that buys their home will go, well, okay, let's get on top of these windows and they will invest in that property. There are so many benefits. If you can just pop the older people in the right size accommodation, we all thrive.
Can you talk to me about amenities and activation activities within your units as well? Is that a thing? Because there's quite a lot of chat in the BTR world around it.
My opinion in summary would be, if I had a spare 50 grand to spend on CapEx, I'd actually spend it on staff, because you can definitely over amenitize for old people, and you can give them fucking snooker rooms and golf clubs and pooch parlour. You can give them everything. But fundamentally, when you're having a shitty day, the person who's going to notice and hold your hand is that lovely girl who, is waiting the tables or whatever. So older people definitely need the space to push themselves out of their comfort zones, take on new things, make connections, get fit. We definitely need all of that. But the thing that makes it feel like home is that amazing housekeeper who always, she knows exactly how you like your bed made, and she remembers to clean out your fridge. And those are the things that you're paying for. It's not the car lift.
It's not the pool room. It's not the ping pong or the social or the cinema area. It's not that.
It's that girl who notices and will say to you, oh, is it the anniversary of Howard's death? Because she cares enough that she's remembered, and that's why you're looking. And so she'll spend 40 minutes having a cup of tea with you because she knows, your husband died a year ago, and she sees you.
Can you talk to me about intergenerational living schemes? Are they a reality? Do they work? What's your view?
My opinion, Matt, is that only students and old people are ghettoised. For some reason, us oldies get put, out the back overlooking a freaking cul-de-sac. And I don't understand why, because you and I live in communities that are, my street is entirely intergenerational and I love it. So we have an experiment going on with our newest development, which opens next Wednesday in Mill Hill, and it is a total experiment. So we have 16 apartments of postgrads, key workers, mature students moving in. And then we have 21 more independent older women moving in, and then all of my oldies. So by the end of that first week, about just under 75% of that building will be full. And I think my hope is that as you walk through reception, you will see, people trotting out off to college in their uniforms or whatever, and you will sit down for your Sunday lunch next to a young man who's working from home and tapping away on his computer, and you will feel more connected to real life, modern life, what it's like, than if you're just living in a homogenous group of people who look exactly like you. So I believe that my business model will be supercharged by tenure, because I think those old people will live longer. And obviously every day that they're alive, I'm making more money. Like, we're all aligned there. Everybody wants them to live longer and have a healthy later life. But it's our conjecture as well that the young people, the students, their resilience and their ability to live in this modern world, which is sometimes quite overwhelming, will be increased because they will be sitting with people who've been through a lot, and they will say, what's happening in Gaza right now? This is what happened last time. This is how it played out. This is what might happen this time. This is how, you get to a resolution. And the company of old people gives you hope, because you actually think, okay, we're going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. This is a blip. We have been here before. We will get out of it. So I haven't yet quite worked out how to track those improvements and evidence that intergenerational living is good for us all. But I've got till next Wednesday to pull that together. So we will work out how to track that. It came around as a quirk of planning that I ended up with a building that allows me to do that. Which is entirely fortuitous. And maybe that's how good ideas sometimes happen, is it's a set of extraordinary circumstances that appear and you go, fuck it, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to make something out of it. So we'll see, Matt.
Talk to me about, we sit here, general election on our doorstep. It's pretty well, baked in that Labour are going to come in. What are your views on Keir being in number 10? Is that going to be good for you? Is it going to be bad for business? Is it going to be good for your residents? What's your view?
I'm incredibly optimistic about a Labour government. I think they're in it for the right reason. I think they're in it for the greater good. I think there'll be less pandering to their cronies and more of the right decisions made for the right reasons. There are things that I read where Labour fundamentally acknowledges that your ability to succeed in life is based on a sense of home. And if you have a fragility about your sense of home, if it's in some way temporary or could be taken away at any minute, your ability to go forward and succeed in life is reduced. And I feel like Labour understands, whether it's a rented home or an owned home, your security of tenure and your ability to get that house for yourself and feel like it is your home, that is the key to economic success for the country. And anybody who doesn't have that has to be quite fucking extraordinary to go on in life and achieve anything, because they're trying to push off from sand, from like quagmire, and what they need is the solid base of a home to go and achieve. And I feel like what we're hearing from Labour is that they understand homes of all sorts of different sizes and shapes and tenure are important. And so let's give you a greater sense of home.
Can you talk to me about your team, size of team, HQ, where is it, and the projects, and what the future or the next 12 months for the business look like as well?
For 5 or 6 years, we didn't have a head office at all, because I thought, we all need to be working with the old people because they're dripping insight into our ears. So you'd sit there at the bar tapping away and they're fucking shoving Victoria Sandwich underneath you. And my new COO joined. He was like, oh no, this is completely unsustainable. We need somewhere to work. So we do now have a scrubby little office in the middle of all our developments. My team, I don't know, Matt, you know more about team and recruitment than I do, but I have taken the strategy of, when I find somebody amazing, I bend my company to accommodate them. I don't tend to go out and look for somebody to fill the problem that my company needs, which sounds a little bit messy, but so the second person who joined my business after me I used to call him Millennial Matt, but now I appreciate that is aging him, because as a millennial, he's getting on a bit. He has no KPI, no job description, no direct reports. His bonus is not based on a thing. Like, he has nothing to do other than ask me the questions I don't know the answers to. Like, that is his job. And so he doesn't even really have a title, but he was the second person into the business. My CFO, when I needed to find the brains of the business, my CFO is not even an accountant. And the board were like, Honor, you're putting forward one candidate for CFO who's not even an accountant. I was like, yeah, but the guy is brilliant. And so the rest of the business has squirmed around to make Raphael, to accommodate this amazing brain, because we needed that brain. I didn't particularly want to put Raphael in some sort of pigeonhole. And then very recently, I got a planning shock last year. I got a no. I don't really get no's. No one says no to me. And I got a no. And it really knocked me for six. The whole Christmas period, I'm like, how did I get that no? Why did I not see it coming? Where did it come from? And then Matt, the boy whose job it is to ask me the questions, what I don't know, he said, the thing is, Honor, you've surrounded yourself by people who say yes, just like you do. And nobody will say no to you. So when you get the no, you don't see it's coming. So he said, the next people that you pull into this business need to be people who can say no. And so my new development director says no, and it shocks me. It took me weeks to accommodate. Oh my God, this person's not saying yes to me all the time. And then Matt would say, oh no, this is what we needed. We needed someone who would present, the half glass empty as well as the half glass full. And so I have oddballs who have no particular job description, who maybe their job is to balance out the bits of my personality that are unhealthy. And then my coup is the person who, amongst all those people who are now saying no to me, is the person who looks after and he'll look at me and go, are you okay? How are you sleeping? Like, I need somebody, just one person on my team who cares. And so that's the coup. So between us, we are a little mishmash of qualifications or lack of, But the result is this. Do you know what, Matt? It's really incredibly flat. So, if I go back to that, my biggest mistake is splitting up with my business partner and running the agency on my own. That sense of loneliness, being at the top of a business on your own, is incredibly isolating. It's just not healthy. It's really difficult for anybody to live like that. And I just wasn't very good at it. I wasn't good at just being the only person that everybody looked at. Like, it's just not healthy. So now I think there are 5 of us in the management team. We call ourselves the BLT, the Birchgrove leadership team. There are 5 of us, and it's really, really flat. And nobody... At the end of the day, I've still got to make the decision.
Of course,
will
the
come
buck
down
stops
to me.
with you.
But I'm not alone. And that is really, really important, I think, for my ability to take risks, is because those 4 people give me this really beautiful, solid... We talk about the triangle being a really safe shape, don't we? It's like really robust. But I don't know about modern 21st century businesses, whether that sort of hierarchical pyramid is the way it should be, or whether actually a modern business is a bit more flat. What do you think?
It's not about what I think.
It is, man. I've got here to learn something.
No, this podcast is about you. We can talk about that later. Tell me about the rest of your team then. So there's 5 of you in your senior BLT.
The BLT. So interestingly, when we took on M&G, and they bought the first 2 assets, we were woefully underprepared for quite how onerous it is having a relationship with a really big business. The reporting is extraordinary. What they need to know about our buildings from a sustainability point of view, from health and safety. We have had to put in like £1 million of overhead into our business just to accommodate those first 2 assets. But the result is a much better business. And I really resisted it. And the crew was like, oh no, you have to do this. You have to have HR and you need health and safety and you need all these things. And of course, now we got them. I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much safer. I feel protected as the director of this business because there is a layer now of people whose job it is to do everything properly.
Governance.
Yeah, rather than just
winging it.
Yeah, which has always been my strategy. So I love that there's about 7 people there who are not winging it. They're genuinely qualified and they know what they're doing. But my overriding fear is, how do I keep what is special about Birchgrove when we have a Birchgrove in every town in the country? And I'm really, really scared that I'm actually not going to be the right person to do that. I can't do it. I won't be the CEO at that point because my personality type just doesn't thrive with people who do things properly. I love that I know everybody's names and I don't really want to work in a business where I don't. So
what's your team headcount now then?
87.
So you're 87. And that's split between HQ and then on-site staff as well?
Yeah, there's 15 members of staff in every development.
So how big's your HQ staff?
23.
So 23 and then 50 odd on-site. And then what's the AUM if you were to...
246 million.
And beds?
715. I need to get to 1,000 by 2027. So I need to find another 250.
So when I talk to CEOs, the kind of 3 biggest challenges that they normally have is capital, deals, and then people, attraction and retention. Is it finding deals is your kind of biggest challenge at the moment?
No, because this is the market for deals, isn't it, man? Jeez, the deals. I mean, it's, we're big believers in, my entire business is based on Beyonce. And when she says, when the world sends you lemons, you've got to make lemonade. So we've had lemons in fucking extraordinary measures, haven't we, since February 22? Well, maybe even March 20. We've had some lemons thrown our way, and every single one of them has just given opportunity. I mean, like, we're batting off opportunities. It's extraordinary. So no, it's not deals. It's not funding. I would like cheaper money, but we have money. Our challenge is just to be good enough. Our customer deserves the most extraordinary, life-changing opportunities. And how do we do that at scale? How do we not just become generic, cracking them out, cookie cutter? How do we keep that amazing hug that you get when you walk into a Birchgrove when there's 100 of them rather than when there's 9? That's my only challenge.
You, having transitioned into real estate, you've done a couple of courses, haven't you? You went to INSEAD and Harvard, am I right?
INSEAD, Harvard and Wharton.
And Wharton. All with a view of upskilling or learning about real estate? Or has it been a case of on the job with your team asking you questions?
No.
I'm just thinking of the mindset of someone who has maybe had a 15, 20-year career outside of real estate but is coming into it now. How do they go from being a runner, running an agency, to transitioning to being a CEO of a real estate developer?
It's a mix, actually. My co said to me yesterday, I need to learn Honor more about, how do you calculate a yield and what are the things that influence the IRR? And so I will send him to INSEAD for a finance course. But for me, the executive education that I actually think the older I've got, the more of it I want. It's not a case of I know everything now. It's like, oh my God, all these things that I don't know. For me, the joy is actually a little bit of time away from the business. I think, I don't know this, but I think to be a CEO, you have to compromise every other single aspect of your life. I am a shitty mother because I'm a CEO. And you have 100%. You can't give 100% to your kids, and it doesn't work. That's not maths. So a CEO will give almost everything to their business, which means that we think about it every single minute of the day. And the joy of going away for executive education is that it's like a geographical, take yourself away from this bloody business, go and learn something, and then bring it back and deploy that. But when you're head down deep in your business, it's really difficult to take that view, to just get your head up. So for me, I need to do it about every 18 months. Otherwise, I won't innovate. I literally cannot innovate when I'm just talking to my own business. I have to be outside of the business to get stimulated by people who are always way cleverer than me. When I went to Harvard, do you know what, Matt? The people who turned up in their own private jets were all the boys, and they were all boys working in self-storage. No operating costs, very cheap build costs, contracted revenue, just repeats all day long. And I was like, oh gosh, I need a bit of that business. How do I bring that, what's nice about that business, into my business? I mean, I haven't got a private jet yet, but it is an aspiration to run a business that could afford a private jet, even if I don't get one. So I just cannot tell you enough how, millennial Matt that I was talking about, one year I said to him, do you want your bonus, or do you want me to send you to, he went to Wharton. And he said, I'll go to Wharton. I don't want a bonus. Send me to Wharton. And he went to Wharton. He came back and he was like on fire for about 6 months. I was like, geez, that was the best bonus I ever spent. Because he just came back with loads of new ideas. And we tried loads of shit. We threw loads of shit at the wall. And some of it was amazing and some of it didn't work. But that was like a really great expenditure for the company to send Matt to get stimulated and to innovate.
What advice would you give someone entering their real estate career?
Sometimes people overthink real estate. You can do a lot of appraisals, can't you? You can prepare a lot of PowerPoints. You can spend a lot of time moving decimal points around. But you do need to just get started. You do need to take that risk and just get going. And I see so many young people have amazing business ideas. And I'm like, fuck, you're waiting for it to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect science. You just need to go. Just get started. So I would say try not to overthink it. I don't know if that's a successful strategy. What would you say, Matt? Come on, you're in it. What do you say to young people before they go for their interviews for a real job that they really want?
I think one of the key things is, I think you've spoken a lot about behaviours. I think in interviews, people are really good at looking at technical skills and trying to match technical skills to a job role, or can you functionally do the job? I think it's the little 1% around behaviours that for me really stand out. So I guess to give you an example, about 7 years ago, I was retained by a property investor, and they were looking to bring in looking to bring in an asset manager to their business to kind of look after a portfolio. And they wanted an asset manager that had already been on the client side, had already done the work, had got experience with the occupiers, and could literally plug and play. But there's this guy who was in Bristol as a property manager, but who wanted to move to London, and he wanted to change from being an advisory side to the principal side. And I managed to get him an interview. And ahead of that interview, I didn't actually know this was what he was going to do, but he gave up his weekend and he drove from Bristol to Colchester to go and have a look at one of the retail parks that they had. And then he drove to Swindon to go and look at their industrial estate. And then he drove to another asset, and then he drove back to Bristol. And he turned up to the interview with this really charismatic, direct, punchy, fun manager. And the first question was, so what do you know about our business and our portfolio? And he said, well, the guy fell off his chair, because not only had he turned up, he'd also had a view, a little business plan in terms of what he would do if he was in the seat. And lo and behold, he got the job. And so for me, in terms of advice, I think that kind of story encapsulates the things that people need to focus on. And if you can exhibit the right behaviours, the technical and the skill, you'll find a way of picking it up. And I think, it kind of rings true, that story, in terms of how you've been able to do what you've done. But
for that person to have that level of curiosity, if that person was if I interviewed that person, oh my God, that's the person you want. The person who has curiosity. That's all we need in life.
And he's still with the same company.
Is he doing well?
And I spoke with the CEO, and he said, "You're not taking him from me." I said, "Don't worry. But I love recalling that story. So anyway, it's the behaviours. So I think if you're preparing, you can never be over-prepared. It's the people that turn up, kicking the tyres, clearly not having done the work, that is a big red flag for me. Anyway, so we cast our focus forward on over the next 12 months. What are you most excited about? What are the plans? I know you've got 1,000 units you need to get to.
Yeah, I've got to find another 250 before Christmas. I think me and Bridges need to work out for ourselves, how do you get that evergreen element? How do we stop selling our babies and keep them, so that is then the platform to get a Birchgrove into every town in the country? It's a funny old market, but this is the moment where you make the money. This is the moment where everybody gets rich, because the market is so weird. And so we just need to crack what is in our future. How do we hold on to these amazing assets? I think for Bridges, sometimes they feel like, as social impact, as private equity with 20% IRR, they start businesses, but then they have to sell them on, and then the bloke who buys them makes out like a bandit. He makes all the lady. Yeah, typically blokes. Oh man, yeah. Maybe I'll just sell my business to a woman. And Bridges have done that a few times now, and they always watch that person make the mega returns. And I would love it for them to say, right, Birchgrove's one we're not going to transact on. We're going to hold this baby, and we're going to make the mega returns.
And we're going to have mega returns from an impact perspective as well.
Yes. I take every ball.
So as we draw to a close, a question that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast is, if I gave you £500 million worth of capital, who are the people, what property and which place would you look to deploy that capital?
Well, Matt, people do give me £500 million every day, and I do exactly what I'm doing now. I fundamentally believe that if you gave me 500 million, your 500 million is best spent with my business in later living. And for all the reasons that we've discussed, that we will take the pressure out of the housing market, which allows young people to get on. We will take the pain out of social care and us all believing that we have to pay for everybody to die. We will return daughters to work. Currently, daughters, still happens, Matt, that women have to look after their parents. And when their parents move in with me, I watch that woman go back to the market. She gets a job again. She becomes an economically viable person paying her own taxes. Your 500 million spent in later living affects so much change, has so much impact across the entire sector that it is a bloody brilliant way to spend your money. So 500 million. I did think about it, though, the other day. 500 million really only builds us 2,000 units. It's not a lot, is it, for 300,000 homeless people in this country?
Not with a lady of your ambitions either, and the size and scale of the problem. I'll have to gear it up, or I'll have to go and get a little bit more than 500 million. But outside of that, if you can't have your team, you can't have your strategy, where would you look to deploy it? Private jets, self-storage?
I mean, a bit of self-storage. I really genuinely believe in home, in a sense of home. And whether it's for old people or people like you in your 2 homes or young people, home is the secret of our success. And so I would spend 500 million in home.
Honor, you are literally one of a kind. You're fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you forever, frankly. I think as an industry, we're so lucky to have you doing what you're doing, and I wish I could talk to more people that had a phenomenally successful career that have transitioned into real estate and are having the impact and I've got the clarity and ability to execute on a massive problem. And
well, you asked some really good questions, Matt, so thank you, because you actually did make my brain run through a few things and think about, well, how do I feel about that? So I learned something in our hour together.
Well, thank you. I know you've done a couple of podcasts before. I deliberately haven't listened to them.
Good.
Because I didn't want it to influence this conversation. But, for people listening to this who are obsessed with Honor, go and listen to those. And I think off the back of this conversation, I'm going to have to go and listen to them as well now. So, well, look, thank you for joining me. I've absolutely loved it. And like I said, I'm really excited to see what you and the team go on to achieve.
I really appreciate you giving me an hour of your time. Thank you, Will.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.